I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Kaitlyn Dever, star of No One Will Save You. First of all, there are going to be spoilers. If you haven't seen the film yet, what are you doing? Go and watch it, come back and watch this. Um, Caitlin, before we do a deep dive into this film, I think this might be your first time starring in a horror film. I could be wrong. And I'm thinking, how difficult is it to portray someone who is scared out of her mind for the majority of the movie? Because that looks like it would be a lot to prepare for.
Yes, it definitely was. I remember, just sort of knowing that it was so drastically different from anything I had ever done in my career. I really wanted to get it right. I've never done that sort of like physical work too for a role, so that was really exciting for me. But yeah, I just really spent a lot of time like going over the material as much as possible. Obviously, there weren't any lines for me to memorize. So it was just about mindset and headspace and understanding who Brynn was, her past, and how just sort of like devastating this story is really. And so getting into the physicality of everything was really just the main um, sort of goal. And yes, also being scared and terrified and trying to I mean, it was really just a discussion, a daily discussion with Brian, just figuring out those levels so that I'm not just like scared all the time. And there wasn't any. So we were just trying to figure out like the levels of that and making it so that each scene and each moment felt different from the next. And um, just keeping it all, yeah, keeping in mind of like the levels of everything was definitely something that Brad and I talked a lot about.
Yeah, that I can imagine. You don't want to be turning up the performance to 11 the whole time, but
Yeah.
there, let's talk about the demands of this role, particularly relying almost solely on physical movement, facial expression to convey emotion. Did you work on this with writer-director Greg Duffield? Was this something uh, that you were hesitant about? Talk me through that whole process because it certainly could not have been easy.
It definitely wasn't because it's so interesting. You think, oh, like having a doing a movie with like heavy 17-page days with a ton of dialogue, you'd think that that is like more difficult. It's not that this is like that's more difficult than this or no dialogue is better than dialogue. It does depend on the material. It depends on what you're doing. And I think internalizing does take a lot out of you. And that's what I did for most of this movie is just internalize emotions and feelings and um, those feelings that Brian so beautifully wrote on paper um, and figuring out how to bring that to life in like a natural way. And that was my main thing too, is that and it's just a constant what was so amazing about working with Brian is just it was this constant, very loose and organic dialogue that we had every single day. But yeah, it was just trying to figure out how to make these moments feel as real and grounded as possible. And so it wasn't like I was indicating too much with my eyes or something. And the other cool thing too, in working with Brian and doing this story is that he wasn't really tied like that wasn't his goal. He's like, I need to make a silent alien movie. It was it was like you can say, I don't know if I'm on to he's like if you feel called to say like shit or whatever, if you feel called to say anything, like I'm not tied to the sort of no dialogue aspect of the story. It just so happens that we're portraying a woman who lives alone in her house and you wouldn't really say she doesn't have
Yeah.
anyone to talk to.
Who's she going to talk
So
to? Yeah.
yeah, so it was just yeah, like just it was just a lot of internalizing and honestly I mean I thought getting the script and getting this opportunity was like it was like an actor's dream to me or at least for me it's so to get to do this kind of job is such a, I just felt so lucky and so grateful that Brian, put his trust in me to take this kind of thing on, because it really is, it's like so such an exercise for me as an actor, and it did, so because I hadn't done something like it before, it did make me a little bit um nervous before doing it, but ultimately it was like that's one of my favorite things about some movies I've seen, where I like that's my favorite thing to watch as like a moviegoer is like silent scenes where you could go for like 3 minutes where no one talks. And I've always been so fascinated by stuff like that. So to get to do it for an entire movie was just a dream come true, really was.
I can imagine. And by the way, I called Brian Gregg, but that was just because I'm obviously not remembering that his name is Brian Dunn. Anyway,
I didn't
um,
catch it.
yeah, yeah, the lack of dialogue, it's not like it was a gimmicky or it wasn't like something novel. I didn't really even notice it, to be honest. I'd kind of noticed it a bit when Brynn is in the town. But then I realized, okay, I think that this movie is going to be pretty much without dialogue. It wasn't something that is, it's not the big selling point for the movie, is what I'm saying. So do you agree that, I mean, you probably did a lot of internal dialogue. You worked with Brian on, certain scenes, calibrating the fear, calibrating how Bryn was feeling. Did that maybe free you up a bit to really start to focus on and hone your ability to convey and elicit emotion through your eyes, through your face, and through various other things that you're doing with your body?
I think it does. I mean, I think it does, honestly, the no dialogue aspect of it does free you up to sort of go wherever you want to in your mind, and sort of I would even, I think for a lot of scenes I would like say things in my head and then hope that that sort of phrase came through in my through my facial expression. There's a lot of that, especially like when Bryn's trying to, like, she's slowly figuring out that she's lost power. She figures out she has water, but she then all of that whole like montagey quick cut moment of the movie, or when I'm like trying to find my keys, like stuff like that is like, oh, I've gotta really think about what I would say to someone if someone was here, um, in my head, and then not. But it was it. I never, I guess to answer your question, I never felt like restrained. I never felt
Yeah,
like, well, I want to say something, but I can't. Brian was, that was his number one thing. He's like, look, I really don't want to make this, I don't want to force this in any sort of way. And I think that that is why it, you get, I even remember getting, 20 pages, 30 pages into the script, and I'm going, oh, because I was just so in it, in the
yeah,
story, that I didn't even realize, like, oh, right, yeah, I've only read a bunch of direction for the past 20 pages. But I think that because he didn't put that pressure on me or anyone involved, in the making of it, I think that that is why it feels, when you're watching it. I mean,
yeah,
I know I was there, I did it, I know what the movie is, but even the first time I watched, I was like, oh wow, I don't think this no dialogue thing really, you don't really notice it. And I think that is what's so beautiful about his filmmaking and his writing. I mean, truly, the what was so great about his writing too is that I found myself laughing a lot, um and he has a really brilliant way of like intertwining, some of the lighter moments within those like really, really dark, scary moments. And then it also allow those lighter moments also allow for the darker moments to sort of really have their moment. But
yeah,
yeah, I didn't feel, yeah, because of the pressure he like didn't put on me to not speak, or he was just so like, feel free to do whatever you need. And he was an amazing collaborator in that way, because it was like the most, like, showing up to set was like the most like organic day. He'd sort of like start with, okay, this is the scene where it's going, because it also like takes on its own sort of life than it did on the page, and we'd walk through it and talk it out. And he was, I love him so much. I actually just was with him last night. We went
Wow.
to, where are you in the world right now?
I'm
Do
in
you live?
Sydney. I'm in Sydney. So
Oh, okay.
yes.
Oh, I should have the accent. I just did a whole Australian. I studied your accent for another show that's coming out soon.
Oh wow.
Love
Let's
the
talk.
accent very much.
It's not easy. It's not easy. I'll be watching, I'll be judging.
No, we just
Yeah.
got a bunch of we went to this really cool place called Smokehouse in LA last night.
Nice.
We
Yeah.
hadn't seen each other in a while, but I love Brian so much. I think he's so brilliant and sweet and
Yeah.
kind.
I want to I'm going to check out his other work because I was so impressed with this film. I went in really blind, not really knowing what to expect. By the end of it, I was just like, ah, and a lot of that had to do with your beautiful performance, Caitlin. Like I was so impressed with how you really went for it. And it does feel very organic. Even though you've got tall, slender aliens walking around your house. So I, well, I want to talk about the ending because if you go online, there's a lot of people who are talking about what do you think actually happened in the end. I have my theory. In fact, I think my theory is the right one, of course. What did you think of the ending actually before you performed it, and then tell me how you interpret the way the film ended?
It's tricky because like I will say that I sort of want to leave
Yeah,
a lot of it up to interpretation, honestly. And I think, I didn't talk to Brian a lot about it because we talked about it and he was like, "Do you want to know?" And I was like, "Oh, interesting. I don't know if I." There are certain things that I wanted to keep as a mystery to me because Brynn is figuring all of this out as she goes, and so I wanted to keep the mystery there just for my own headspace in the performance. But I think I've read the theories and it's so that's what's so cool about making a movie like this is that people are really that's the reaction that the movie had after the release is sort of like, "Oh wow, it's so cool to make stuff like this," because it really gets people talking about it and sharing their thoughts and um I mean, yes, they decide to let her go and she gets to live out the fantasy that she kind of always wanted and the fantasy that she lived with by herself just out in the town now. And um I think at the core of the story for me, I was sort of mainly focused on the struggle of and sort of her arc throughout, I guess, defeating the aliens, in that, she starts off as this, like, very scared, confused, just sort of, like, terrified person that then finds her way through and says, "You know what? I'm gonna really get these guys. I don't know what they're doing, why they're here, but I'm gonna." She, like, makes a choice and makes a decision, which is really a nice moment for her in the film. Um But I think that, yeah, she's just to me, she's just a person that is just trying to be a person and like live in the world. And, she has her past and she made a mistake and it is something that she's just trying to work through and um, trying to be okay in the
yeah,
world. And so I think that for me, that was the main focus and the drive for me throughout the story.
yeah,
Um, but it's been so cool to see like Guillermo del Toro talk about the ending and Stephen King talk about the ending. And it's been like, yeah, it's been
yeah.
so, that's been a really cool thing just as an actor to, be a part of that part of the movie
Yeah,
really.
the after, because
Yes.
sometimes you make something really good that you're really proud of, and then it gets released, and then it kind of no one seems to really care. It happens a lot. When you make something like this that you're passionate about, you worked really hard on, and then people respond to it and say it's good, and then they have theories about it. I mean, come on, you couldn't get better than that. That is so
Yeah.
good. It's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's either she defeated the aliens and they let her go because she's had enough trauma in her life, or she didn't defeat the aliens, and she's living that idyllic life that they do for everyone in the town. And her idyllic life is where the town accepts her and she can dance in public with the town. That's my theory. There's one of two theories. Anyway, we won't go into too much of that
I
because I
like
don't.
those theories. Those are
Yeah,
some okay.
yeah, that's what I think. Um, so we talk briefly about the reaction. You know, Stephen King is a legend, obviously. We've all read his books ever since since I was a kid. He said this is brilliant, daring. I think he said involving, scary, truly unique. When you get that kind of reaction from someone like him, and I'm sure Brian must feel really good about that kind of feedback, that must feel really good for you and the entire creative team behind the film, right?
Yeah, I mean, any sort of recognition, even people watching the movie, and I think a lot of people actually tuned in to watch it. I mean, it was really that, even that alone, but then the Stephen King and then Guillermo on top of it, like it really it means a lot to me, but I know just how cool it is for, yes, everybody involved in the making of it, because it just is with a movie like this, there's so many moving parts. There are so much, like half of the movie was shot, we did the full, obviously shot the entire movie in New Orleans, but it was only half of what we were gonna see later with all the effects and CGI. And so that, I mean, the effects team is incredible, like visual effects and costume, and everybody worked so hard to make and then the production designer, it just all worked so hard to make all of these specific choices for the character and the story. And that to me is just so beautiful to, see something like that come to life, and then for people to watch it and then love it and then talk about it in the way that they have been has been really just like so yeah, just really wonderful, and I feel very grateful to be a part of it.
I can imagine. And for my part as the viewer, I just really enjoyed watching Brynn be scared, but then she ended up killing quite a few of those aliens, and the way she did it was actually as a complete badass, and I found that very, very fun to watch. On that note, Kaitlyn, thank you so much for your time today and your insight. Congrats on some really amazing work, and good luck this for your next project.
Thank you so much, Robert. I appreciate it.